AMI Audio technical producer and producer of AMI Audiobook Review, Nisreen Abdel-Majid, is here for a minute to look ahead at what's coming up after the short break. She's joining us from Mississauga, Ontario, and is what's coming up.
Hey, coming up next, one of our avid audiobook listeners, Michael Feir, joins us as our very first guest on AMI today to review the making of another major motion picture masterpiece written and narrated by Tom Hanks. The book offers a blend of humor, insight, and a deep dive into the world of filmmaking, and a perfect summer read for historical and literary fiction. And who better to tell the story of how movies are made? Tom Hanks. So that's what's coming up.
This book completely absorbed me for the past 2 weeks. I finished it just a couple days ago. Very quickly, Niz, this book is 16 hours long. Is that too long for you? Like where do you draw the line?
I think it depends. It depends on the narrator. It depends on the story. I mean, if it's this book, I can definitely do 16 hours. I love Tom Hanks. I'm a huge fan, and I feel like he has a very good perspective on filmmaking. And with his history and his career in movies and acting and as a writer as well, I think it kind of will give him a really good perspective on how he writes this book and how he narrated this book. So I'm really excited to get into it. I started it and I can't wait to finish it. It's so good.
Well, if you've already picked it up, then I'm sure that if you stay tuned and listen to Michael Feir and I's review of this book, you're going to come out with a whole bunch of other information and maybe even some spoilers.
Possibly.
Niz, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to work.
Thank you.
Nisreen Abdel-Majid is a technical producer at AMI Audio and the producer of the AMI Audio Book Review. She was joining us from Mississauga. And with that, I think we're all set to get started with today's AMI Audio Book Review. Curiosity fuels you and passion carries you along. Lose either one and you're done. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski. Michael Feir is a regular contributor to Kelly and Ramya, where he has a regular segment about audio entertainment and accessible technology. He's also a fellow audiobook fiend like myself. Today we're partnering up to review a book that he recommended, The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece by Tom Hanks, which is the source of the quote I read at the top of the segment. Hey, Michael, how's it going?
Very good. Yeah, good to be here.
Note that this is the first time we're doing AMI Audiobook Review live. How does it feel?
Well, always interesting to do something for the first time. I guess that means there are less rules to break.
Less rules to break, and there's just one rule: don't make a mistake ever. Easy?
Well then. Yeah, it all depends on how hard those rules are.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a huge proponent of knowing what you're getting yourself into when you're reading a book. So before reading a book, one, you should read the synopsis, but also go do some research on what people have to say about it, what the goal is, because you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't know what the author is trying to do. So before we dive into this review, I just want to read the synopsis of this book so you get a bit of an idea, and then we're going to give you a little bit more context to see whether or not you want to pick up this book. So again, this is The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece by Tom Hanks. Here's the synopsis. From Tom Hanks, the Academy Award-winning actor and best-selling author, comes a novel about making a star-studded superhero film inspired by humble comic books. Funny, touching, and thought-provoking, it beautifully captures the changes in American culture since World War II. Part 1 begins in 1947. A troubled soldier returns from the war, meets his talented 5-year-old nephew, leaves a lasting impression, then disappears for 23 years. Cut to 1970. The nephew, now an underground comic book artist in Oakland, reconnects with his uncle and creates a new comic with his uncle as a flamethrower-wielding World War II hero. Cut to the present day. A successful director finds the 1970 comic and decides to make it into a modern superhero movie. Meet the cast. The difficult male star, his wonderful leading lady, the eccentric writer and director, the producer, the gopher production assistant, and everyone else on both sides of the camera. This is a love letter to the chaotic, head-dizzyingly complicated world of filmmaking. The audiobook is, of course, narrated by the author himself, Tom Hanks. And we have a sample for you. Let's take a listen.
A little over 5 years back, I had a message on my voicemail from one Al McTeer, which I heard as Al McTeer. From a number in the 310 area code, this no-nonsense woman asked me to call her back regarding a thin little memoir I had written called A Stairway Down to Heaven, about my years of tending bar in a small subterranean club that played live music way back in the 1980s. At the time, I was also sort of a freelance journalist in and around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I wrote movie reviews. These days, I teach creative writing, common literature, and film studies at Mount Chisholm College of the Arts in the hills of Montana. Bozeman is a gorgeous, if stark, drive away. I get very few voicemails from Los Angeles, California. My boss read your memoir, Ms. McTeer told me. He says you write like he thinks. Your boss is brilliant, I told her.
That was a sample of Tom Hanks narrating his novel, The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece. The sample was played back with permission from Penguin Random House Audio. This audio is 16 hours long, and you can find it on Sela in human narrated audio, Audible, or Spotify. Sela, for context, is the Center for Equitable Library Access. It's a library with accessible materials, different types of accessible formats for books that's available to Canadians with print disabilities. So like I said earlier, the synopsis doesn't give you the full picture, and I think we need to give it a bit more context to let people chew on something to let them know whether they want to pick up this book or not. So, Michael, in your opinion, what did this synopsis leave out in terms of what to expect from this book?
I think what it left out was kind of the journey of the characters. This is really all about the characters. The movie is the main opposition. There's no real villains in the piece. It's how do you overcome the deadlines and pressures of actually making a movie? And it shows you the journeys of all the characters from even before the movie got started, like right back to like it sort of indicated with the source material in the profile in the introduction there, in the sample. You get like right back from where they came from, what their lives were like before, and then they're how they get hooked into this crazy process of movie making, and then what it does to them, how it can affect people. You sort of really get a look at sort of the people involved and what the process does to them, which I think is the core of the book, really.
I'll add that the meat of this book is the art and chaos of movie making. The plot is kind of pushed to the side a little bit, and it's more about the details of making a big blockbuster Hollywood movie, albeit a fictional one, which is kind of a unique thing. Like, this is a fictional story. It's a novel, which is an interesting decision from Tom Hanks, because he could have made an autobiography where he talks about making movies, but instead he decides to make it a novel, which in a weird way, ironically, kind of lets him be more honest, because he can use fake names and tell stories that I presume are based on real stories with real people that we might all know. But that he could not do that in autobiography, because you're not just going to name drop people like that. So if you're into the behind the scenes of movies, this book is a must read for you. What's the short version of your thoughts on this one?
I think it starts off slowly, and it kind of can feel like you're dropped into all these different lives as the process picks up. But all that backstory, the payoff is later. The payoff is when you see the pieces come into place as the movie is completed. So it's a really slow start, but it kind of, all of that information, it's not just fluff. Tom Hanks is not just filling space. There is purpose to this. It shows you the human endeavor of movie making. And I think that's really what he's kind of after here is he wants to kind of write a book that really illustrates what you're, if you're thinking of getting into movies, what you're getting into, the chaos, the long hours, the craziness, and the journey, the kind of crazy coincidence plays a huge part in this. In all the people's journeys. I'm thinking of Inez in particular in her journey, and Al McTeer's journey. Just happened to be at the right place at the right time and step forward to solve a problem, and your life could change drastically.
Yeah, this book weirdly has a lot to say about work ethic and how to be successful and being business-like. The quote that gets passed along a lot in this book is solve more problems than you cause and you're going to make yourself valuable. And it's honestly, like, this book it almost reads like self-help in a weird way, because there's so many speeches from characters talking about like how you can make it in this business, kid. And sometimes they're kind of condescending sounding, but they do speak some truth. You do need to solve more problems than you cause. Be reliable. And everybody who's unreliable on the film set in this movie is like so vilified and people hate them. It's kind of funny.
Yes.
I thought the book had a strange format though, because you mentioned earlier it takes a while to get started. I sent you an email when I started this book when I was 25% in, saying, "Oh, please tell me it gets better," because it's a really slow start and you don't really know where it's going. You expected to hear about movies, but instead the first 25% is about some guy coming back from the war and how he has a strained relationship with his sister and his nephew. You don't really know where it's going. And it turns out that like 25% of the book is pretty much just setting up the inspiration for the movie they end up making. And there's a couple time jumps.
You get the whole process from the very roots, the inspiration, right through to the shooting is not a big chunk of the book. Like when they're actually doing it, like most of the book is prep work and backstory. And so the characters are where it's at. You really have to appreciate the character and getting to know people to really enjoy this book. I think if you're looking for, what's going to happen next? Like, this is not, it might be an action movie, but this is not an action book.
No, it's not. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of talking, a lot of dialogue, which is pretty snappy. Like Tom Hanks writes dialogue pretty well. But speaking of characters, which characters did you find most intriguing?
I liked Bill Johnson, the director, and his, at the what's it like at the top of, when you're in control and the responsibilities and the decisions. How do you manage people? How do you avoid burning bridges? Right? And you see him do all that as he manages the people trying to make his picture. And then you see the other one that really pulled me in was Inez and her journey. Because you saw her, working jobs, living at no privacy at home, work is her escape, and she's working like 3 jobs, and then she gets pulled in. She solves a problem for an assistant at the time, and I think it was frozen yogurt. It was a whole bunch of just little things that people did, and she would do that. And you saw the mentor as well, Candace Mills, before. So you saw the people and their paths who now propel Inez into this role of assistant, kind of gopher on the movie. And she's solving all these problems for these people and running into all the work things. Like I really felt her journey inspiring. Like, do the right thing at the right time. Like be initiative, do what you can to solve problems, and it just might get you in the door that otherwise would never open for you. Like, and you really get a good look at that.
Yeah, but a gopher, to explain, is someone who goes for this, goes for that, just runs around doing any odd job that anybody on the set really requires. I did really enjoy Inez as a character. She was at the start an Uber driver that happened to pick up one of the producers on the movie, and the producer on the movie found Inez particularly resourceful and clever, and through that she ended up, through a weird series of events, becoming a gopher on this movie. And Inez, by the end of the book, you find out that Inez basically established herself in Hollywood and started doing like production work instead of gophers. So honestly, like, really inspiring. That said, I can tell you're a huge fan of this book. I have my issues, and I do want to get into them. Inez is
Alrighty.
great as a person. Yeah, yeah. Inez is great. I like her as a character, but I'm also a bit frustrated at Tom Hanks's writing, that a lot of his characters are inhumanly good at their jobs, like supernaturally good at their jobs. Inez, the producer, Bill Johnson, even the lead actress, Ren Lane, they never make a mistake, and they're practically gods. Like, they don't have a lot of complexity. They're only good and unbelievably good at their jobs. Like, am I being fair here? What do you think of that?
I would question. I think people at that, when you get that far in, when you're on, in a big blockbuster like that, you had kind of better be good. And we saw the reverse of that with the lead male actor, who gets, he's not a team player, and really just does not, it just treats all his perks are like his, just thinks of him as his due as leading actor, and just and you see what happens to a character like that if you're not a team player. This can happen. You could be a lead actor in a big movie that the director has gone out of his way to find, and then find yourself, cast out because you're not doing what is needed for the bigger picture. And
I did quite like OKB.
Yeah, I found it a neat example of what happens when, and it kind of felt for him because he's done so much, right? And now you could tell success has gone to his head, and this is what happens when that happens. So you sort of get a sense of that through his arc in the story, and then who comes up to replace him, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, OKB, for the time that he was in the story, was an absolute joy to read. He was a complete ass, and just like made everybody's life around him complete hell. It's like he was just fun to hate and just kind of believable. He has like a super young French girlfriend from Paris. Like, it's like so stereotypical. He's just like, he's an artiste type that's just like impossible to control. And the way Bill Johnson communicates with him, I thought those were some of my favorite scenes. The way a very knowledgeable, experienced director handles actors with high egos and very complex, mysterious processes for how they go about acting. That's one of those times that I felt like you could see Tom Hanks knew what he was talking about. Not that Tom Hanks seems to be like a high maintenance actor. In fact, he seems like the exact opposite. But I'm sure he's been on movie shoots with people who are very complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Those conversations, they just seem so realistic. Like, Bill Johnson handled OKB like a boss.
And I think that was part of what he did with kind of a more archetypal set of characters like that. Like, even with the perfect, the good, well-working team, the skillful director, almost magically so, right? You still run into all these crises and things, and it's like, wow, it so much can go out of whack, and it takes so little to put a schedule out of whack in a movie, and the things that have to go right. I think it illustrates the high stakes of all that pretty well.
I want to back up a bit. Do you disagree with me that a lot of his characters lacked complexity?
I think some of them did, but I don't think all of them did. I think he probably thought that through. Like, the Robbie Anderson. I found him to be a really fleshed out, source of the comic, right? I mean, you got to see enough of his life to sort of tell. Dace Mills, right? One Candace, the mentor for Al McTeer, you got to see her, some of her journey, and I think that's a case where a little more revelation might have had more impact. Like this is one of the characters that doesn't survive. That's one thing he actually illustrates a couple of times: death and what that can do to a movie shoot, or So you see that a bit as well, and what you have to pull to save the picture when that happens. But yeah, some of the actors, so it's hit and miss. Some of the characters are really fleshed out, I think, quite well, and then others, they're cutouts. They're there to serve a purpose, and then you move on, like that.
We'll say that it's a mixed bag when it comes to the complexities of his characters. Like this book is not strong in its plot. It's not strong in its characters. It does have good heartfelt moments. Don't get me wrong. It has quite a few of those. But again, it's a 16-hour book. Like there's a lot of dry characterization here. And this kind of speaks to my thoughts on this book being, I have mixed feelings because I have a lot of negatives to say. Like I'm looking at my script right now. I have a big list of negatives here. But that said, I still gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. Like it's a really good book in one specific aspect, the movie making scenes, which they're not just great, they're fantastic. Like I've loved those sections. And you read this book twice. Were those your favorite sections too?
I did like them, but for me, I guess I really appreciated some of the character arcs more, like Dace Mills and her journey, and Al McTeer, and just how these people get pulled in. That draws me a bit more than how chance intervenes, like how Bill Johnson finds his partner, his love interest in the movie. It's one person on a plane who doesn't know anything about movies, didn't had no idea, right? I mean, basically had rented a couple of his movies, but that's about it. Like, and that was such a relief to him, right? That they end up having a great conversation. Like just the chance encounters, that I think was a neat. I kind of enjoyed how he worked with that throughout the book and showed where it led.
It's true. There's a lot of scenes like that. Things that are sometimes coincidences that in a fictional story you would say like, oh, what are the odds of that happening? But in reality, coincidences and weird chain of events happen all the time in real life. Like that's real life, is those weird chance encounters, and they lead to one thing and that leads to another, and suddenly you find yourself being a gopher on a big Hollywood movie making 6 figures. I do want to talk about the production of this audiobook. Obviously, it's narrated by Tom Hanks. I mean, the bar is set pretty high with a celebrity name like that. Does he live up to it?
I think so. He does. When he's narrating, he does a good job. The other narrators that are in the book, I think, did quite well also. And that must be some pressure. It's one thing to narrate with other professional narrators, but now you're in there with Tom Hanks, and but I think it worked pretty well. They chose good people. They did. I think they performed their lines well, and gave the characters that voice that they needed. I'm not sure Tom Hanks could have. I guess he could have done it all, but it would have been a different experience. So I'm glad they kind of have him do some of it and have other people step in for character roles.
Yeah, agree. Though the way they brought in other narrators to fill in some of those other point of views, because this book has a lot of different point of views. In fact, it's a bit strange because sometimes it's told from a third person omniscient narrator, and other times it's in first person. It's quite strange. But there's a bit of lack of consistency in like I'm not sure what to call it, page time, minute time for these narrators. Like Tom Hanks reads the majority of it, and occasionally a new narrator will come in for literally 30 seconds Like only get 30 seconds in the book, and you just think, what was the point of that? I mean, that guy probably got paid $300 for that. Good for him. But but it's just strange. Like you kind of, I've seen a lot of books that do multicast narration. They'll kind of spread out the work a little bit. They'll do two narrators, and it'll be like evenly split. And as a listener, you can kind of get used to that. But here, you'll have long stretches where it's only Tom Hanks, which he's amazing, by the way. So I'm not complaining about those segments. And then you just get sprinklings of other narrators here and there. More in the fourth quarter of the book near the end, where they really accelerate the pace and they change the point of views quite a bit more. I thought that was kind of cool because it is a 16-hour book. It's nice that Tom Hanks like sped up the pace quite a bit. Like he was,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like he rushed the ending. But actually, let's talk about the ending. Without spoiling it, was it satisfying in a book that's light on plot? How was the ending?
I think, yeah, like it's, you see that how the picture wraps, and it goes a bit after that, which I appreciate. I hate it when it just like, and the picture was done, the end, right? You get to see, people see the picture for the first time a little bit, and what, I thought that was particularly, especially given the plot was just the making of this movie, like where this movie came from, how it was built, right? And so the ending, I think, gave it some, some satisfaction. You get to see where the characters are left a little bit, and what's next for some people, and that's not always good, by the way. It's some of these people aren't in easy street after this is done. It changes you, like, and I think Tom did a good job of illustrating that. This can be a hard thing on relationships, and it can really it can, puts you in a different track for life once you've done something big like this.
Ultimately, this book, I would characterize it. Maybe this is a bit of a stretch. I'd characterize it as a didactic novel. A didactic novel is a fictional story that's specifically written to teach you about something. And I feel like that's what Tom Hanks is doing here. He's teaching you about making movies, the type of people that make movies, the little details about making movies, arriving at 4 a.m. to do makeup. And when you walk in, you have to say you're walking in so that the makeup artist takes the brush away from somebody else's face, because when you step in the trailer, it kind of bumps up and down a little bit on the suspension and it could ruin the makeup. Like it's those little details that tell you that he knows what's going on here. I learned so much about movie making, and I really appreciated how, despite it being so regimented, highly scheduled, there is a lot of improvisation and unexpected things that end up making it in the movie, like a lot. And that's the chaos of movie making. You can coordinate as best as you can, but there's only so much you can do. Michael, we're going to wrap up very soon. Do you have any final thoughts on the book? Maybe like a final line to anybody who might be interested in picking it up?
I think, you're right about the didacticism here. He really is, that's his purpose, teaching you, giving you a tour of what it's like behind the scenes, what it's like to work on one of these things from a bunch of different perspectives. And of course, typewriters make an appearance. Tom Hanks likes his typewriters. So look out for that as kind of an Easter egg there for you, for you guys to find. It's a fun book if you want to learn about making movies, and don't go in with huge expectations about plot. Right? That's basically the truth. If you go in with those thoughts, I think you'll enjoy the book.
Which is, in reading reviews online, I saw a lot of people went into it expecting a story, like a well-written literary story, and that's just not what you're getting here. And again, this goes back to the start of the show. You need to know what you're getting yourself into. Michael, I want to thank you so much for recommending us this book.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed my second reading of it.
Second reading. Oh, that's 30. No, my math is bad. That's a lot of time you sunk into that book. Thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
That was Michael Feir. Michael is a regular contributor to Kelly and Ramya, where he has a regular segment about audio entertainment and accessible technology. That wraps up this segment of AMI Audiobook Review. Remember that we're uploading all of these AMI Audiobook Review segments to our podcast feed. That's all the time we have for AMI today. We'll be back here tomorrow at the same time at 11 a.m. Eastern. Big thank you to everyone watching on YouTube and tuning in to AMI Audio. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. Thanks for listening.